we consider David Grusch a whistleblower. Who else do you?
Well, he's not,
consider
but he's not a whistleblower. I mean,
you don't think David Grusch?
No. I mean, when a person who has a security clearance goes to the Defense Department, pre-publication review group, DOPSR, and asks them to officially clear a particular piece of information for release to the public, that person, once they're authorized by DOPSR to tell about it, is not blowing a whistle.
My interview with lawyer Danny Sheehan. He is a constitutional and public interest lawyer, public speaker, political activist, and educator. He graduated from Harvard Law School in 1970 and has been hard at work in legal battles ever since.
Last meeting, we, as you recall, discussed the assassination of President Kennedy, where I set forth the views at the end of the class about Task Force W, having been directly involved in the assassination of the president.
He's been involved with the Pentagon Papers.
Very significant, this goddamn New York Times expose of the most highly classified documents of the war.
Oh, that, I see. I didn't read the story, but you mean that was leaked out of the Pentagon?
Watergate.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
This base has been the scene of many presidential arrivals and departures over the years, never one quite like this.
And Iran Contra, to name a few.
The intelligence with the people there. However, the Mongay government that was in power at that time was sympathetic to the Contras, and so therefore the journalists themselves had to continue the investigation.
What began as a strategic opening to Iran deteriorated in its implementation into trading arms for hostages.
And he's also been involved with UFOs and extraterrestrials. He famously represented John Mack against a Harvard committee to review his work, the Harvard Phycologist who studied the effects of alien abduction cases, famously interviewing the witnesses from the Ariel School UFO Event in Zimbabwe, where school children saw a UFO land near their school and aliens exited the craft.
I just felt all horrible inside.
You felt horrible. At what point did you feel that? When you saw the craft, or when you got home at night? Or
when I got home.
You had that horrible feeling when you got home?
Yes.
And say more about that horrible feeling, Lisa. What was it like?
And most recently, he has represented the Disclosure Project for Dr. Stephen Greer, and currently he represents Lou Elizondo, former head of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, otherwise known as ATIP. He also runs the New Paradigm Institute, a nonprofit designed to facilitate disclosure for the public, offering a wide range of services. If you're new to the channel, y'all, and you like content like this, please hit that subscribe button. I put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day. And please hit that like button, vetters. That really helps out the videos. So thank y'all so much for the support there. And of course, comment down below. What do you think of my interview with Danny Sheehan? Let's dive in. Welcome. We have a very special guest. We've been very excited to get Danny on the show, and he is here. So welcome to the show, Daniel Sheehan. Danny, do you prefer Danny, Daniel, Mr.
Danny.
Sheehan?
Danny.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm respectful.
Yeah, right. Right.
I'm from the South, Danny, so I got to make sure I get the name right.
Okay.
Well, look, Danny, this is kind of, I had definitely a lot of other questions that I've been preparing because, you know, for this interview for the last week and a half or so. But over the weekend, some stuff just kind of fell in the lap of the UFO community. So I kind of want to start with that, which is really Jason Sands, this whistleblower that's come out. What do you know about him?
Well, all I know is that he had reached out to us to ask us whether we would be willing to represent him legally. We did some background checking on him, etc., and we have said no. That we have about 18 lawyers that are working with us at the New Paradigm Institute. They're being trained in detail on how to represent potential whistleblowers at all levels, and we did our research on this, and we've said no, that we're not going to be representing him.
Sure, sure. Was this last year? Was this recent, or was this a while ago?
No, it's been comparatively recently, the last few weeks actually, that
Oh, wow.
he reached out to us, and so that we had been reviewing this, and we decided we're not going to be able to represent him.
Okay. Yeah, I heard him say something in the space that he actually said he had all his legal stuff in order. So I'm assuming he found someone else to represent him. Do you mind know who that is, or?
I don't know. We don't know.
Right on. Right on.
No.
Do you want to say why you guys didn't want to represent? Was this something with a story, or you just had too many people? It couldn't take on one more?
No, I mean, there's been a good deal of confusion apparently on his part about what he knows and what he doesn't know, and what he's heard from second and third and fourth hand people. That at least people are getting the impression that he is saying that he knows it or knew it himself, and he doesn't, and that there's been some confusion on his part, and plus he's not taking any advice from anybody apparently on what he should be doing and how he should be acting. So we have declined to represent him.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's part of him coming out in this Twitter space. I know a lot of people have criticized him. I mean, is that something you would have suggested to a whistleblower, to come out in a Twitter space like that?
Well, we don't decide things hypothetically. That we have a number of people who've reached out to us who profess to be people in possession of really important information about the topic, and that we have to find out what information they actually have, or at least to start with what they purport to have. We need to find out, what kind of clearances they have, and whether we're allowed to get the information. We do not solicit them giving us any information that is classified. We've been very clear about that, and that we don't advise them to be speaking publicly about what they're talking about, or who they're talking with, because the different committees in Congress and the Aero Office and the IGs, there's all kinds of different authorities that one can speak with, and you can't just go, tossing out information all over the place. Well, you're trying to entitle yourself to certain protections, so that one has to be careful about how one goes about providing this information to the proper people. So
yeah,
they have to be willing to abide by proper advice, or else we're not going to represent them.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Do you think this can hurt him then, coming out in a Twitter space? Does that negate whistleblower protections?
It's difficult to say hypothetically like that. It depends on the person and what it is they know, and who it is that they've shared the information with, if anybody, already. And so that we need to know all of that ahead of time, in the peculiar position of not knowing exactly what the information is that they know, because we've refused to accept any security clearances, because if we accept security clearances, then people are going to assume that anything and everything that we know we must have gotten by dint of the security clearance, which obviously in our case is not true. I remember I got this advice back eons ago when we were doing the Iran Contra case, and one of the investigators who was assigned to the Pike Committee. The Pike Committee was the House side of the Church Committee that was investigating the intelligence abuses back in 75 and 76. In this particular professional investigator that worked for the Congress told us, said, look, absolutely never accept a security clearance. He said, because it's clear that with your contacts, you can find out virtually anything that you're going to be able to find out about, almost even with a security clearance. So don't ever accept a security clearance, because then they'll just sit on you and prohibit you from ever talking about anything you know. And so that I've instructed all of the lawyers working with us not to accept any security clearance. Some of them have had previous security clearances, in order to have the right kind of sources that we need to have. But they don't have presently operative security clearances, so that we're exercising great care in that regard.
Yeah, no, that honestly, that makes a lot of sense. What exactly were Jason Sand's like claims to you guys? Do you remember? Because I've heard
we're not at liberty really to discuss that.
Right on,
because that was all in the context of a prospective potential representation, and so that all of that is protected.
Remains confidential, right?
In order for the people to be able to come forward and talk with us about our possibly representing them, we're not at liberty to talk about what it is they've said to us.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Totally. He mentioned something about a UAP forum that's part of the UAP task force. Have you heard? I'd never heard of this before.
No, I didn't either. I don't know what he was talking about. I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, he said another guy that's sort of come out at the day before him named Steve. I don't know if that's his name. It's not his name, but he also claims to. It's like he said it's like 1,000 people in this sort of chat room.
Well, there are a number of those around, Patrick. You know that there are several at least of these chat rooms where the various people talk to each other, and some of the people are on more than one of them. You know, and so it's very difficult. So that I've not been on. I don't go on any of those. You know, I remember the one of them that there's a thing called Clubhouse.
I remember that.
I got a call from a friend of mine who said that there's a bunch of people on this Clubhouse. This must have been 2 years ago, I think it was. They said that.
Was it Michael Mazzola?
Yeah, it was Michael.
He told that story in a space. Well, part of it. He told part of it. Yeah, that was a funny
story. It's like 11
story.
o'clock at night. It's like 11 o'clock at night or something. Michael calls me. Danny, he said they're on this Clubhouse thing, and they're talking now with Eric Weinstein.
Yeah,
and Eric is asking people questions, and so that you ought to go on it because you've been interviewed by Weinstein. You know, and I was on Eric's show. He interviewed me for like 5.5 hours. We had this 5.5 hour marathon conversation which didn't cover anything about UFO stuff. It was all about the Iran Contra case, the Watergate case, Karen Silkwood case, etc. And we had this big, long 5.5 hour conversation. And so then he started. He was hosting this Clubhouse conversation, and he was talking about the UFO stuff. And so Michael called me and said, look, Danny, you better jump on it. I said, I'm not part of the Clubhouse. I don't even know what those things are. And so he said, well, here's how you sign up, and you hook up. So he hooked me up in, and then Eric said, oh, look, Danny Sheehan is just checked in here. I don't know. They had tons of people that were all talking to each other. And he said, Danny, he said, look, I don't know if you know anything about UFO stuff. Do you know anything about UFO stuff at all? So I said, by the way, yeah, I do. You know, and so it was kind of an entertaining. But I think that's the only quote chat that I've ever been on about it, because I'm not into that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, apparently, I don't know. It's something with people that have a certain security clearance are all talking together, and this is where Jason gave his story first, right? Supposedly. So yeah, that's interesting. Have you ever heard Jason brought up, there was a lot of confusion about this thing called 20 and back, and this is something I hadn't heard of before, and I had to look into it. Have you ever heard of this program, 20 and back program?
I only heard it in the context of people talking with us about Jason's discussions of it, and we were saying, what is that? And then people explained it to me.
Got it. What do you think of that program?
Well, apparently he was, so I understand it, he was getting a lot of that information like third or fourth hand from Corey Good or something. And I said, whoops, there's trouble, right from the start.
That's it.
Yeah. So I said, uh-oh, a big flag on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I found it fascinating. I'm always learning, to be honest with you, Dan. I'm sort of new to this topic. I'm not even a year in as far as really diving, not surface level, you know, seeing a show here or there. I'm kind of
Right.
new to it also. I'm always hearing new things every week, to be almost every day, to be honest. And that was one of them. You know, this guy, Steve, again, who came out before Jason, who was supposed to back up his story, worked in the intelligence community. He talked about uncovering some program about an alien time travel program that he knew the name of it. He had spread the word of this name.
Well,
Have you ever heard of it?
No,
This?
you've run into this kind of stuff already, Patrick. Welcome aboard. You know, I mean, this is crazy stuff. I mean, that people just have this desire to kind of just like write a science fiction book live, you know, and telling people that that's what they've experienced, and they just go on and on and on. And I think they're looking for a creative writing job in Hollywood or something, you know, and they're sort of recruiting live. So
Yeah.
and then other people cite them, and then other people cite the person who cited them, and you're into like the 4th or 5th level of information, and people are starting to become more and more convinced that it's true because they've heard it at least from 3 different people, you know, and that's what's going on here. Well, one of the purposes of having the New Paradigm Institute is to try to vet all of that stuff. You'll appreciate that. To try to vet all of these different stories and say, look, let's get down to it. You know, what is it that you actually know? You know, what is it you've been told? You know, now it isn't that things that you've been told aren't helpful leads sometime to try to figure out stuff. But you know but you got to get down to the nut of it. You got to get direct court admissible evidence. What we're applying is the Rule 11 standards of doing a preliminary review, as if you were going to be able to stand before some sort of a juridical forum and represent their arguments. And so that as attorneys, you need to be able to make an independent judgment as to whether or not you find this to be credible. And if you find it to be credible, you have to also be able to attest to the fact that you hold a good faith belief that, given access to the proper discovery mechanisms of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, that you'll be able to obtain court admissible evidence that'll be able to establish each of the essential elements of whatever the claim is that you're making, and that you are willing to present this person to a jury as a credible witness, and that you have obligations under the Bar Association to do that. And so that what we're doing is we're bringing that kind of precision to this rather extraordinary field, and we've done it in the past. You know, I mean, that's what we did in the Iran Contra case, for example. That's what we did in the Karen Silkwood case. You know, that in the Watergate case was different because in that case it was a criminal defense. You know, actually, at F. Lee Bailey's office, when I was there, that the office was actually representing James McCord, who was the former CIA, quotes, air quotes over former probably, but the former CIA wiretapping specialist, you know, who was arrested in the Watergate Hotel. And the purpose there was to get him to talk. At least that was my purpose, you know, to get him to explain, which he did to Judge Sirica. And he wrote the famous letter to Judge Sirica blowing the whistle on the plumbers, the White House plumbers, and eventually Nixon himself. And so that my objective as a public interest attorney, as a public advocate, is to try to get the information, reliable information, solid information to the people. That's the key in a democracy like this. So that we're a different, very different kind of legal organization. That the objective of all the litigations that we engage in are to get the information out to the public so that our people can make decisions about what the policies are going to be of our country, about major public policy issues. You know, this issue that with regard to the UFO phenomenon, as you know, the context in which I've been involved in this over time has varied. But for example, when I represented Dr. John Mack at Harvard University, it was very difficult to figure out what the criterion was because it wasn't clear what this faculty committee was at Harvard. It clearly was not an AAUP authorized faculty committee. The American Association of University Professors have very clear standards articulated for how you can, as a faculty, initiate any kind of a tribunal investigating a tenured professor, and it clearly wasn't that. And so that one of the first steps that I was taking on behalf of Dr. Mack was to figure out what this panel is about, and what their area of jurisdiction is, what exactly their authority is, et cetera. And so that in some of the cases that we've been involved in, what we need to understand is what is the forum that is actually going to be adjudicating any particular issue, and what are the facts that are pertinent to it, and what are the standards of admissible evidence that they're going to be applying. So what we've done is we've simply adopted the federal rules of civil procedure, and that we utilize those, and the lawyers that are working with us, that we have over 550 volunteers that have contacted our New Paradigm Institute, university professors, professional investigators, police officers, all kinds of people, lawyers, obviously, too, that have contacted us saying, look, this is extraordinary. We finally have a potential opportunity as professionals to engage in this particular subject. And, for years that we've been interested about it, but we've had no particular forum in which to do anything about it, because the universities won't really let you do anything about it. If you try, the lesson was not lost on most of the people in the university faculties about what John Mack had to go through. So that they haven't been able to really get to teach the courses about this, and so that we've got 30 university professors now who have contacted us saying, this is great. I would love to be able to participate with you. We can help prepare white papers about philosophy, about theology, about physics, about the social psychology. So we're organizing those people now, and there's a university professor at Ohio State University that's helping to coordinate them, and so that. And we have the lawyers, we're coordinating the lawyers, and we're coordinating different professional groups now. The investigators are particularly interesting. Most of them come from a military CID, a criminal investigation division background, but there are police officers, CID people that we're working with. So we're
a lot of these people, like, are they there to help? I guess just anything that you guys need, right? So if you need to investigate a whistleblower that's approaching you, or if you need help with legislation, or you need help with, like you said, okay, yeah, right on. I didn't realize it was so multifaceted, what you were doing.
There's eight different major tasks that we're involved in. And so that people fall into one or another of the areas that we need to work on.
Sure. What, you mentioned like the John Mack case, for instance, and any of these cases that you've worked on, and you've done phenomenal work. Like, is the UFO case, if we were to put it as one case, is this like the hardest thing you've ever had to work on? Because there's not really like, let's John Mack as an example. That there's this review board, and who they are, and who to. But what about for this? What is the, like, who do you bring the case against? I mean, you can't just be the whole government.
Well, it's important to know that, that of all lawyers, that less than 10% of lawyers are actually litigation attorneys.
Sure.
90% of the lawyers don't ever go to court at all. So there's all kinds of things that they do. And most, the majority of people in the Congress, for example, are lawyers. And a lot of the people in their staff are lawyers that do staff work and research, et cetera. What they're attempting to do is to bring to a particular issue the kind of at least alleged acuity that is developed in legal training of applying specific standards of evidence. Understand that they tell the famous story that they tell at Harvard Law School about Oliver Wendell Holmes, one of their famous alumni, when he was on the Supreme Court. He was this inveterate workaholic. He was working 7 days a week all of the time, and he would never stop. And his wife, one spring afternoon, back in, I guess, the late 1890s, that she was insisting on a Sunday afternoon she was going to go get him. That was when the Supreme Court was still at the Congressional building. They didn't even have a Supreme Court building built yet. And she packed a big spring lunch, a little picnic lunch, and hooked up the buckboard and went over to the Capitol building and kind of dragged him out of his office and made him come with her. And they were riding in the buckboard out into the Virginia countryside. And his wife turned to him and said, "Oh, look, Ollie, look at all the wool has been shorn off the sheep over there." And he looked over to her and he said, "No, my dear, the most that we can say is somehow this wool has been removed somehow from at least the side of the sheep that we can see." At which point she, turned the buckboard around and brought him back and threw him out and went back and ate the lunch herself. And so that lawyers conduct themselves in a way that is irrational almost and unreasonable with this arbitrary precision that they're supposed to engage in. And theoretically, they're capable of bringing that type of clarity and acuity to virtually any subject that they're asked to assist in. But it can become obnoxious, as all the lawyer jokes tell you. What we're trying to do at the New Paradigm Institute, since we're a legal and public policy 501c3, is to bring that type of acuity to the investigation of this subject, the presentation of the information, to work in conjunction with people on the House and Senate side to work on legislation, so that we can have the kind of precision that we need in the legislation. And as you know, and we'll probably talk about, in the 64-page bill that got passed by the Senate, there were all kinds of enforcement provisions that were put in there. There had to be a lot more than just the sort of facial command from Congress telling the intelligence agencies and military and others that they had to comply, because the lawyers for that other side are going to say, "Oh yeah, so what? What if we don't? And what are you going to do about it? And if you don't do anything about it, then we don't have to do anything about it." And so that's another thing that we need to be involved in, is saying, look, if you're going to pass a statute that is going to be trying to get the intelligence community, especially, to cough up information that they don't want to cough up, you better bring your lunch. You better be ready to engage with them, and you have to put in enforcement provisions, which was done in the original bill, and that's most of which was taken out. That Michael Johnson, refused to bring the Senate bill to the floor in the House unless all of that stuff was taken out. So you know perfectly well what they're up to. And so but we have the situation now where the bill that was in fact passed, the 24-page bill, was passed, that still has the command in it, commanding all 6 of the military services, all 18 of the U.S. intelligence agencies, all 32 of the U.S. Defense Department agencies, and the one that became most controversial, which I know you're going to want to talk about, is the private aerospace companies. This wasn't ordering someone who found a flying saucer in their backyard. They're talking about the aerospace corporations. That's to whom the statute was directed. It wasn't directed to just average citizens who, find a what they call Green Lantern ring, or a flying saucer buried under their yard. That wasn't directed to any of those people. It was directed to the private aerospace corporations that, as you pointed out one time, that it's 99.9% of the time they have gotten access to any of this technology only through direct government action. That is paid for by the tax persons. That this work has been done. That this technology has been put into their hands to try to get them to evaluate it as contractors, and that doesn't mean that they own it. It doesn't mean that that they have the intellectual ownership of that technology. For the future. So that 100 years from now, when we're trying to have a craft that goes to the even potentially outside of our solar system, that you have to pay this company billions of dollars for the licensing of their technology. I mean, which was actually turned over to them by the government to look at it. So the issue is a much more narrow one than has been proposed by people who've been, you know, complaining about the abstract theory of you know, eminent domain, for example. So that's kind of the things that our institute has been involved in trying to make sure that the language in the legislature is precise and is designed to have enforcement ability. You know, so those are a number of the things, and of course we're attempting to kind of oversee the effectiveness of Congress. You know, in getting to the bottom of this, we're willing and able to oversee the activity of AARO, is how efficient and how effective is it being, and you know that there hasn't been an organization like that in place up to this point. What there's been in the past is like MUFON, that are actually going out and doing field investigations and preparing reports, and a lot of the efforts have been made by, you know, the International UFO Forum to bring people together to have these conversations, etc. And for the 47 years that I've been involved in the project, you know, 43 of those years at least have been devoted to trying to get people to believe it, to really understand that there is such a thing as a UFO phenomenon, you know, that it's not all swamp gas, you know, or mistaken flocks of birds. So now we've crossed this particular divide now, you know, for better or for worse, to the point where people believe, and you're aware of the difference, they believe that the government has acknowledged that UFOs are real. And of course, the people on the government side say, well, sure, a UFO is, to the extent to which it's only an unidentified flying object or an unidentified aerial phenomenon. Yeah, okay, good. We admit it's unidentified and it's an aerial phenomenon, but, you know, it ain't no UFO. You know, because we don't admit that UFOs are around, but the media and the public are saying, oh, the government has acknowledged that UFOs are real, and so that you can see the degree of confusion, the lack of clarity, the infusion of what you're hearing with what you want to hear, that's going on here. And then this is made extraordinarily more complex when you get people like Corey Goode or these other people that are just making things up, you know, and spinning a yarn or a good tale, you know, and then people believing it because they want to, and then pretending that it is real, you know, and so we have what we're
it dilutes the process, right? Is what you're saying? It dilutes the real information.
It distorts the whole process. So that one of the things we're trying to do at the New Paradigm Institute is unpack all of this and put things into their proper category. And we can say, okay, here's something that's fictional. Here's something that people were just speculating about. Here's somebody who says that they were told a certain thing by a person who has reasonable credibility. Here's a person who believes that, and they're saying that they have firsthand knowledge about this. And now the quest, as of the last few weeks, is, are you talking to somebody who's put their hand on one of them? You know, that you know, that's a because I remember with Larry, what's his name, the radio guy, that Larry
King.
Yeah, Larry King. Remember the moment that Larry King actually changed his attitude about all of this is when he was talking to one of the guys that was at Rendlesham Forest, who actually put his hand on one. And
it makes a big impact.
The instant that Larry King, I saw the show, and he said, wait a second, you're saying that you actually put your hand on this thing? And you said, yes. And then he turned to Philip Klass, who was there on the show with him. And he said, look, you know, that's not somebody mistaking, you know, a lighthouse light shining on the bottom of clouds. You know, this guy put his hand on one, you know, and you could see the whole world changed for Larry King at that point. And from that point forward, he realized that there was actual credible witnesses as to the reality of this. But it's taken us all this time to get some of the government institutions, in this particular case, the House and Senate committees, to actually start taking this seriously. And as you know, that Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and others have been instrumental in getting us across that divide. But it isn't a divide that has caused the government officially to acknowledge that what the regular citizen believes to be a UFO, is some kind of an extraterrestrial spacecraft,
Sure.
and that's why the testimony of Colonel Grusch was so important, because he actually asserted that, and more correctly, he asserted that he had been told information in a position of some authority on his part that caused him to conclude that it was true, that we were in possession of an extraterrestrial, non-human origin spacecraft and biologics, as he put it. And so when he said that, and he asserted under oath that he believed it to be true from his position of authority in the government, and then secondly, the fact that the Congress would present that public testimony, knowing full well what he was going to say. So you have the entire House Oversight Committee basically endorsing that to be told in public. And what still 99% of the people don't realize is his statements have been cleared already by the Defense Department's, a pre-publication security review. They had already cleared him to say that. So, okay, now, so what is the level of government authority behind what he's saying? And what exactly is he saying? And all he's really technically saying is that I personally believe it.
Correct.
Based on what I've been told.
I mean, he did give, I've always said this on my show, that, what frustrates me about the reception of David Grusch's investigation is, hey, he's saying, go look here, talk to these people.
Yes.
And no one will do that. And that's what keeps me in the David Grusch circle. And I find him to, in my opinion, to be the most credible to me in this. He testified before Congress. He has this investigation. He's saying, he's given a treasure map, basically. Hey, go look at these places, talk to these people. I'll go with you. And they won't do it. And that's a big red flag for me. Who do you, we consider David Grusch a whistleblower. Who else do you?
Well, he's not, but he's not a whistleblower. I mean,
you don't think David Grusch?
No. I mean, when a person who has a security clearance goes to the Defense Department, pre-publication review group, DOPSR, and asks them to officially clear a particular piece of information for release to the public, that person, once they're authorized by DOPSR to tell about it, is not blowing a whistle. They're not revealing things that are violative of their agreement to keep things secret. They're not doing that. They're not revealing something that the government takes an official position needs to be kept secret, like a whistleblower would be. And so that neither he's not a whistleblower, and the reality is that Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, people still aren't aware of the fact that those videos were cleared by the same Defense Department, pre-publication clearance, security review, and so that there's a level inside the government at that level that is authorizing those statements to be made. So they're not whistleblowers. And it's what's causing some confusion on the part of the public.
I've always called them a whistleblower since last July. Honestly, that answer surprised me, but I agree with what you're saying. Like, not that it matters what I think, but I do agree.
Well, it does matter. It does matter because if in fact one has real whistleblowers who are willing to take the risk of revealing something that they realize is violative of their security clearance, but that they're willing to do it anyhow. For example, Dan Ellsberg. Dan did a thing that was when I first got the call. I got the call from Jim Goodell, who was a legal counsel for the New York Times. I was the one that got the call from him originally, saying, "Look, I've got to come over and talk with you right away because something's happened here." And he comes over to the office at Cahill Gordon, where I was, and revealed that they were in possession of 47 volumes of still top secret government study that was done by the Rand Corporation. So we had to then deal with this fact that it was still classified, that he had a classified clearance to be able to, that somebody had a classified clearance that was in possession of it. We didn't know who it was at that time. But, you know, the FBI wiretapped our telephones. They wiretapped the telephones of the lawyers for the New York Times. Scotty Reston called Floyd Abrams and told him that. And so we ended up having to get orders from the AG to take the tap off from our office, because they were trying to find out who it was. You know, and the same thing is true during the Watergate burglary case. You know, that there was information in there that was classified, and that as it turns out, I didn't know it at the time, and nobody else did in the office. It turns out F. Lee Bailey was actually on a list of lawyers for the CIA. You know, who actually they called it Index 4, and that he was one of the
interesting. He was kind of just there in case they need him for something or have a question.
Four lawyers specifically that were retained by the CIA, so that if in fact an officer or operative of the CIA was caught engaged in a domestic covert operation, which is completely illegal, because they're explicitly prohibited from doing that. You know, in
operating on United States soil,
it's totally forbidden by the National Security Act of 1947. So, but you can see when the Central Intelligence Agency itself puts on retainer 4 lawyers to be prepared for in case any of their people are caught doing it, then you know that they're doing it. And
that's interesting. Yeah. All right. I see what you mean.
So when we found out about that, you know, I mean, that's how it turns out. We also found out that Lee Bailey was the de facto attorney for Santos Trafficante, you know, and so that's how we got to interview Santos Trafficante, to ask him straight up, what are 4 of your gunmen doing in the Watergate Hotel, you know, which people still don't know about, you know. So that I've been in these situations over the past 50 years.
You know what a real whistleblower is.
That's
essentially,
right. I know the difference.
Yeah. Are there any real whistleblowers right now that you would deem a real whistleblower in the UAP topic? I mean,
well, no, because they haven't violated their security clearance. What they're trying to do is get protection. They're trying to either get it cleared for them to say it, or they're only telling other people who have adequate security clearances. You know, and so that's why the Senate Intelligence Committee staff and others have people on their staff who have the adequate clearances, who can be read in on this. You know, that we had the same problem all through the Iran Contra case. Is, you know, in order to get Oliver North, for example, to confide in the people in the Senate Select Intelligence Committee about what it is he was doing, you know, and whether it was legal or whether it wasn't legal, he had to get immunity in order to do it.
Sure. So I would have done the same thing.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest.
So that we as the lawyers at the New Paradigm Institute need to understand the differences here, in the nuances that are involved, and what our job is to do is to provide the protection to the individuals so that they can in fact get the adequate clearances to reveal this. And if in fact they're dedicated to revealing it, even if they don't get the official clearance, then they become a whistleblower. And then you're going to have to drop into a completely different mode of representing them to protect them against retaliation. And at the same time, work with the Congress to try to increase the legislation that
to help them
better protection to them.
Sure. Totally makes sense. I'm all for that.
Are part of the duties that we have as lawyers at the New Institute.
I think a lot of people can support that. I myself support that. Now, and I've heard you say before that you think, you know, whistleblowers are going to come out this year. Is that still part of the plan, or is that becoming harder and harder?
Well, the thing is that's a decision that needs to be made by the Senate Intelligence Committee. And by Warner, you know, Mark Warner, who's the chair of the Intelligence Committee now, and Marco Rubio, who's the ranking member in the Republican Party. You know, they need to make that decision as to whether or not they want to come forth. They're available, but at the present time, they're not whistleblowers because they haven't confided to anyone outside of those who are legally authorized to know. exactly what it is they know.
I see what you mean.
And so that the question is Congress willing to bring them forward and to provide them the kind of immunity and the kind of protection that they need, even if in fact the Defense Department pre-publication review in security office does not authorize them to say it publicly. You know, and that's a political decision they need to make. And the reality is that the problem is that members of the United States Senate realized that if they do something to offend the national security state people, the national security state people could send millions of dollars of covert money into their campaign next year and oust them from office, just like they did Frank Church. You know, that's how Frank Church got removed. You know, and that's how also Dick Clark from Iowa got removed by the CIA, bringing money out of the Nugan Bank in Australia through two South African banks, rather, and brought the money into their campaigns. They knocked out Frank Church by putting millions of dollars into his re-election campaign in the Senate in Idaho, asserting that he supported the Equal Rights Amendment.
Wow.
And he supported some kind of limited gun control legislation. And so
that's happening with some of these Congress people with aerospace companies, right? They're
that's the exact kind of threat. Well, it's a different threat. The aerospace industries are threatening to not pay for their campaigns.
That's what I mean, right? Like they exactly sort of it's the opposite of what you're saying, that they want to pay him to stay in office, but to sort of follow in line, right? Do what they want, right? Which is a political.
Well, they view themselves as a constituent, you know, and once the court and Citizens United, you know, asserts that the corporations are people and that they have a right to make as large a campaign contribution as they wish to in order to get a congressperson to support their private financial interests, you know, then you got a congressperson that's basically bought off. You know, and
I mean, why don't they flip it on them? Why don't they say, hey, we won't give you the contracts you want, right? Because they live off. I mean, don't all these aerospace companies, I mean, basically live off of the contracts we give them, essentially, a lot of it?
Mostly.
I mean,
mostly.
Right?
Well,
Can
we
leverage that?
Well, they have private, you know, I mean, Boeing and Lockheed, you know, they're making other planes.
I mean, I realize they have the other stuff, but
a
lot of it came from our contracts, and I mean, it's got to be at least 50%, or I can't imagine that we couldn't leverage that in some way. But
we can. But the problem is that as most everybody knows now, you know, that what's happened over the decades is that this kind of symbiotic relationship has developed, you know, between the military contractors and the Pentagon.
Yeah, fair point.
And that's the problem now, is they live with each other. You know, and they go to the same clubs. They play golf together. They get taken on junkets, you know, by the corporation, and it's just right in your face right now. You know, and it's one of the problems that has surfaced here with regard to the UFO issue itself, is because people are kind of taken aback at how transparent it is now. When you have a guy like Mike Rogers, you know, who is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, you know, when you find out that he's out of the 3rd Congressional District down in Alabama, next door to the Redstone rocket range, you know, and that his principal financial campaign contributors is Lockheed Martin. When you say to yourself, well, why would Lockheed Martin do that? You know, why would they support him? You know, because it's for their private profit. You know, and we've got to deal with this as American citizens to try to free up our members of Congress from that kind of coercion. You know, and it's even worse when the coercion is coming from the national security state people themselves, the military people, you know, who are threatening people, you know, and threaten you, you know, by sending in covert money, you know, out of Australia into your campaign to defeat you, you know, and that is a fundamentally unconstitutional activity on the part of people inside the executive branch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course. I mean, if they're going to protect the greatest secret of all time, if they're even knowing that's what they're doing. But what do you think is like you know, we're basing all of this movement, this podcast, all this community, everything is based on the idea that we know for a fact there are X truths. What are these X truths to you? Like, meaning, you know, for certain we have NHI and how many different species, and we have crap. Like, what do you know for certain that you're basing all of this work on, right? Paradigm Institute. I mean, your whole life is, at this point, I would say, I mean, I know you do other things, but I would imagine a lot of your time is spent on this. So, like, what do you know to be true to want to spend, you know, your time on this?
Well, there's
and I know you saw those photos,
yeah,
and that, but you know, beyond that,
well, there's a list of them. You know, for example, I saw the little 8mm black and white home movie that Colonel Corso actually recorded for his grandchildren, not to be shown to them until after he passed away, where he actually recounted the events that took place in 1945. I'm not talking about 1947, when he was the director of research and development at the Pentagon, when he asserts later that he was given, that he was, you know, have put into his possession certain of the technology that was recovered from the Roswell crash. This is earlier. He talks about the events that took place in 1945 when he was one of the range officers at Yucca Flats at White Sands in June of 1945, when we were in the process of detonating the first nuclear bomb, the first atomic bomb.
Okay. Is this the Trinity case that I hear about? Is that this is okay? I just covered this. It was in the Chris. Well, I thought maybe Chris Mellon was mentioning in his tweet that he put out. I kind of found this 45, and I thought, is that connected to the Trinity?
Oh no, this is a different one. This is a little different. This isn't this is one that took place right at Yucca Flats. This is a different. Got it. This is a different one that the people aren't talking about yet much. But what he asserts in the little 8mm home movie, that he basically put on a little pedestal and took his own little 8mm movie and then put it away so that it wouldn't be available till after he died, only for his grandchildren. And he told them that when he was a range officer in June of 1945 at Yucca Flats at White Sands, he said he took a lunch break and went off into kind of the nearby hills to have lunch, just sit down and have his lunch. And he came upon an actual UFO that was actually just sitting on the ground there, and that it had been forced down apparently by some engagement with the intense radar systems they had up all around the test facility. And he said that he actually approached the vehicle, and a UFO person got out of the vehicle. Not a U.S. military person, not a Chinese person, you know, not a person from Russia, you know, but a UFO person who, you know, he came out of the vehicle and telepathically communicated to him, pleaded with him to please help them, that, you know, they weren't here to hurt anybody, that what had happened is somehow their vehicle had become disenabled. And that the being was asking him if he could possibly go back and get them to turn off whatever this is that was going on, so they could escape. He said he actually made a decision at that point that he went back and actually got them to turn off the radar for like 5 minutes. And then saw the vehicle just shoot right up off the ground and take off, you know, and he told his grandchildren that. Now, what myself as an attorney, when I see a piece of evidence like that, I place a great deal of credibility in that, that a person in his stature is not going to be putting together a film like that for his grandchildren.
Just make up a story
just
yourself.
make it up.
Yeah.
That
does sound a lot like Jason Sand's story, coincidentally.
Well,
which is odd.
I don't know exactly what he is saying, you know, from one minute to the other. But the bottom line is that in the same way when the famous cable in General Ramey's hands, You know, that's something that no one would have thought you could ever figure out how to read the cable. You know,
Sure.
but I was.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, that's what I got. I was tangentially involved in that because the person came up out of the audience back in 1994 when I was speaking at the International UFO Congress, giving the people there an update on what we were doing at Harvard with Dr. Mack. And this fellow came right up out of the audience and explained to me that he thinks he had found the photographer that was called in the middle of the night to go and take the photograph of the infamous, weather balloon debris, right? And I, as soon as I saw that photograph ages ago, I said, "Wow, what is that he's got in his hand?" There's General Ramey kneeling down on the floor taking his little photo, and he's got, it looks like a cable of some sort in his hand. And so I said, someday we're possibly going to get to read that thing.
We'll get it blown up, right? We'll have a better, clear image, and we can,
And that's exactly what we did. The guy told me that he thought he found him. I said, look, if you can find the guy and find for sure that that's the guy, find out if he's actually got the negatives, because he probably may have kept the negatives because it's such a major event in his life.
Yeah,
it turns out he had. And so we ended up getting it digitized. And blown up and worked on. And when we discovered what was actually in it, they said, take the disc, to right field, and bring the bodies, and you're saying that's
what the message said.
That's right.
It said, "Oh, wow."
Right. And that's not a weather balloon, And so when I saw that, we went and told Peter Jennings about it and said, Peter Jennings, you got to let people know about this. And Peter Jennings actually put on, he got ABC or whoever it is he worked for at the time, to make them allow him put it on television. He did like a half-hour little special show where he. Oh, really? Yes. Oh, yeah. You can find it. It's probably in the dusty dungeon somewhere now. Yeah. But I can tell you, that's what I did. I said, screw. I said, just like someday we're going to be able to get at we're going to have technology where, with regard to the Zapruder films, we're going to be able to track in the negatives, the emulsion that's on the negatives. We're going to be able to track the heat signatures of the bullets. We'll be able to do that someday. Wow. I'm not sure anybody who has actually custody of them has the motivation to do it, but
I don't know. That's I live in Dallas. I live in Dallas, and I grew up here, so that's a big thing here. I used to live down the street from that site in Daly Plaza. Yeah,
and my chief investigator at F. Lee Bailey's office personally interviewed, Santos Trafficante, who actually put together the assassination team, who were the ones that killed the president, and he told us right straight up, that they'd killed the president. And we knew this back in May of 1973, because that's what the Watergate burglary was all about. And people don't know that.
The Watergate burglary was to cover up the JFK assassination?
No, it was the effort under the direct order of Richard Nixon to go in and wiretap the telephones of Larry O'Brien and to put electronic listening devices in his office, because he had just been chosen to be the new head of the Democratic National Committee in 1972. And Nixon was terrified because he realized that he knew that Larry O'Brien had previously been the Washington lobbyist for Howard Hughes. And it was Richard Nixon back in June of 1960, when he was vice president under Nixon, is the one that had contacted Howard Hughes to get him to put together the assassination team to kill Castro.
Oh, Castro.
That's right. And that's the team that did it. That's the team that killed the president. And Nixon was freaking out over the fact that if it ever was learned that he's the one that actually put together that very same team, that nobody would believe that he hadn't been behind the killing of the president, which he wasn't. But that's why he ordered them to go into the Watergate Hotel and get those tapes and get to wiretap the phones and put the listening devices to see if Larry O'Brien was thinking about going public in
Yeah.
the 1972 re-election campaign for Nixon to reveal that he's the one that put together the assassination team in that case to kill Castro, because if they started tracking that and finding out about that, it's going to track all the way back to Dallas, to Dealey Plaza. And so that's what he was doing.
Wow.
And that's what we
So
found
it's all connected in some instance.
And that's what we found out
right?
about in F. Lee Bailey's office that nobody else knows about, you know? So, I've been in some of these kind of situations where we come to find out things that other people don't know about. And that we need to try to figure out how we can get that made public, you know, appropriately.
And there's a lot of that in this UFO topic, right? You know, a lot of things that you just can't come out with publicly.
Yeah, but you know,
are these things that you think would convince the general public?
Oh yeah, no, I'm absolutely convinced. I'm absolutely totally convinced.
No, but I mean, what you think it would also convince the general public?
Yeah, and I believe that if we had a jury, if we picked a jury just almost at random, you know, without even going through the voir dire process of kind of vetting them, but putting the average 12 people in the box and then presenting the evidence that we have, you know, that they're going to overwhelmingly determine that in fact, you know, there is in fact the UFOs are real, that the United States government, a deep element in our United States government, knows that they're real, that they've been engaged in, you know, activities for at least 75 years, concealing this, that they have mounted a major program to suppress the information. They've punished people. They've ruined people's careers in order to discredit them from being able to convey truthful information that they knew. You know, that there's a whole series that we are putting together at the New Paradigm Institute, a list of 100 facts, you know, that we're willing to vouch for. And we can assemble these 100 facts, and that we're working also with Richard Dolan, because he's done such deep research and pulled out all kinds of
Richard Dolan. Yeah,
we pulled out lots of documents through the Freedom of Information Act that we have to back these things up, and so that we can establish a level of credibility with the American public and with the legislators, you know, in their staff, to say, look, here's the information for you. Here are the stepping stones that you can cross this river, you know, to get to the other side. And that's one of the things that we're engaged in doing now, is preparing that list of 100 facts.
Will it have, like, you know, sources that, or just, does that make sense? Like, will it?
No, it'll have
will we know?
Footnotes.
Okay, I got you. I got you.
You have to have that.
Oh wow.
You know, we're not just going to sort of proclaim it.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence that we're going to give you, on the basis of which you can, dare I say, vet this, and verify that it's true to your own belief.
Wow. Okay, that's honestly pretty exciting. If I'm being honest, what do you think is, like, top 3 that are coming? You know, do you have any on the list already that are you know about?
Yeah. Well, I know about it because I'm writing it.
Oh, okay. You're the one writing it personally.
Well, because I'm overseeing it and supervising it as the director of the whole operation, in working with Richard on it. You know, and one of them is that we can verify that there was in fact a craft that crashed at Roswell, and that it's not a weather balloon, and that in fact it was a disc. And that there were bodies that were involved, and that it was sent to right field. They're not going to be sending a weather balloon, you know, debris to right field, you know, from Roswell. They're just not going to be doing that, you know, and so that we can assert that to be true, and that we can demonstrate that there is this 8mm film that a major at that time did,
Mr. Corso,
you know, for his grandchildren. We're saying, look, we can verify there is such an 8mm film, and there it is, and that you know, if you look at it and you determine your own self based on your knowledge of people, whether you think a person like that would have provided that to his grandchildren, you know, just to con the world, that he didn't even know that it was going to be made available to anybody else. You know,
I mean, that is odd. I agree. Is Philip Corso the same person that feel like I made a video where maybe he had a conversation with an entity in a cave.
Well, this is the one.
That's the same guy, right?
Yeah, it's the
This
same
is
guy.
the same. It's the same.
This is the
Okay,
same
yeah.
Philip
All right.
Grossman.
Then I know I can picture him in my mind now.
That's
What
right.
he looks like. Okay, right on.
That's
right on. Yeah, very cool. Do you think these crash retrieval programs that are currently in existence, like they're operating right now as we speak, like they're out doing stuff. They're what do you think is like the last craft they got? Like last week, or is this on a weekly basis? Is this?
It's not clear yet. You know, I mean, that we'll find out. You know what the most current recoveries have been, but you know that we're trying to interview the people that are involved in the program. Find out, you know, are they currently still in the program? When was the last time they were in the program? What's the most recent event that they know about? You know, as long as we're careful about it and we go step by step through this process, we're going to be able to assemble the information. And then we're going to be able to present it to the American public. We're going to be presenting it first to the people in the Senate Intelligence Committee and to the people in the House Oversight Committee. Those are the two committees in the respective houses of our legislature that have demonstrated an openness and a willingness to go forward on this. You know, we're not going to waste our time beating on the doors of the House Intelligence Committee, because we know that that Michael Turner, who chairs that, you know, is adamantly opposed to any public revelation about this. So we're going to go to the right people, provide the information to them, and try to get the constitutional instrumentalities of our government to be doing the job that they're constitutionally obligated to perform. You know, that's our job as citizens, you know, and that if they don't do that stuff, we have to do it ourselves. You know, the whole idea of setting up a representational democracy is so that we don't all have to do this all ourselves. But we know perfectly well that because of some of the corruption of our government system, primarily through the major funding that goes in on behalf of corporations and wealthy interests, you know, that they're not efficiently and effectively performing their duties right now. So that we have to have groups like our institute that will do those jobs for them until such time as they become aware of the fact that we're going to do it anyhow. And so then they try to take it over, like they did in Iran Contra. Like they just didn't want to hear, they just didn't want to hear about it, you know.
So you think potentially it could get to that point where they try to take over the New Paradigm Institute?
Well, they'll do the they're professing that they're willing to do the stuff now.
I got you.
We're just in a watchdog kind of capacity right now.
Yeah.
To say, look, we're overseeing this. If you're doing your job, everything's fine. If you're not, then we've got a few witnesses here that you don't seem to be paying enough attention to. We're going to bring them to you and do everything we can do to get you to pay attention to them. If you don't, then we're going to start talking with them about the potential of them exposing the information anyhow. And that's going to put additional pressure on you because the information is going to come out anyhow. You might as well get credit for it, you know, instead of being, you know, attacked for keeping it secret. There's a whole dynamic, you know, that when you've worked in Washington as long as I have, you know, that I came in to Washington in 1975. I imagine that was probably even before you were born.
It is, yeah. 79. I was born in 79.
How strange that is! How weird that feels to me. But the bottom line is, I came in there then, you know, and the kind of things that we were, you know, that we were meeting like in early 76 already. You know, we were meeting with candidate Jimmy Carter, and I helped organize the Washington, D.C. offices of all 54 of the major religious denominations to interview Jimmy Carter and talk with him about the things that we wanted him to be interested in. And we got him to agree in a meeting at 110 Maryland Avenue that was chaired by Stu Eisenstadt, who was his chief policy guy, you know, that if he were elected, he would actually sign an executive order cutting off all U.S. military aid to any foreign dictator who was found to be engaged in the systematic violation of the human rights of his own citizens. And it was pursuant to that agreement that we got from him that he ended up, after being elected, cutting off the military funding for Anastasio Somoza in Nicaragua. And he also cut off the military funding from the U.S. to the Shah of Iran, both of them. Ergo, the Iran Contra scandal that broke out, just because of that, because those two dictators had the funds cut off from them, and our operations director to the Central Intelligence Agency was working to keep both of those fascist governments in power because they viewed them as being, quote, anti-communist. And so when they fell from power because we weren't supplying the military equipment to them daily, when their citizens rose up and threw them in the street, basically, that element in the Central Intelligence Agency still kept on going, trying to oust the governments that the people put in. And so when we got Congress to actually pass a law prohibiting them from giving aid to the ousted government of Anastasio Somoza, and they just defied it. The operations director to the Central Intelligence Agency, and the fellow who was running the entire thing, people still don't realize that to this day, was not Oliver North at all, nor was it John Poindexter, the National Security Advisor for.
Oh, interesting.
It was Theodore Shackley. His name was, who people don't even know who he is.
I've never heard that name.
Theodore G. Shackley. He was the ADDO, the Associate Deputy Director for Operations of the agency under George Bush Sr. when he ran the CIA under Gerald Ford. And these are just things that we know from the nature of the work that we do, and that what we're saying is that we've become very familiar with the fact that our government agencies, our committees in Congress and stuff, are highly politicized. They're highly leveraged by major funding that goes to them, and they're afraid of being retaliated against by elements in the deep state. They're deep inside the national security state of our government, who will in fact retaliate against them, totally unconstitutionally, but they will do it. And the members of Congress know that. They don't want to whisper it. They don't want to talk about it above a whisper, but they know it, and they're intimidated by it. It's happening now with regard to the UFO issue. And what we're trying to do is, based on all 50 years of the experience that we have, is try to figure out how to get through that labyrinth here to get this extraordinarily important information put forward to the people, so that we can actually promulgate some set of protocols pursuant to which we can actually I mean, it sounds preposterous, Patrick, just talking about it, to actually try to set up some protocols for how we can relate to an extraterrestrial civilization.
I mean, it does sound crazy, right? What am I supposed to say?
Yeah, we feel like people on some tiny island in Fiji, that all of a sudden we've discovered there's an outside world, and we've got all of our chieftains telling us that we can't talk to them. I mean, this is preposterous.
No, you got an uphill battle. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, there's a lot of, I've never had my own personal experience, and I talk about it on the show, that everyone's on a different journey in this topic, right? Whether if you've never had a personal experience, what information you may know, if you have contacts or no contact, right? You're just a regular person and getting information in between, taking care of your kids and living your regular life. And it's a lot to take in sometimes, some of these stories, some of these things that get said, right? Totally like, what point. So I understand that you guys have an uphill battle, because you've also got to deal with that. You're trying to convince Congress, you're trying to get legislation, you're dealing with aerospace companies, you're dealing with the pushback, you got whistleblowers, you got people that just come out like Jason Sands, who potentially are wasting people's time. Which I can start to see that element a lot more of, not wanting people like that to come forward, because it does just waste time that could be better spent doing something else.
But it affirmatively distracts people and confuses
100%,
and increases the lack of credibility of other witnesses. And the other factor we have is everybody trying to instigate and promulgate kind of disputes and fights horizontally with each other. For no good reason whatsoever. It's like you live in a trailer park and people have got nothing better to do, than to argue about somebody's dog peed on your yard, and everybody, gets all up in arms about it because they got nothing better to do. you know, and so I think that stuff is silly. So what I've tried to do is try to be friends with everyone. I try not to alienate people. Once in a while, I, you know, say things that I should have thought a little bit better about, but I try to be careful about it. You know, obviously,
You're human.
Obviously, my reference to Travis, you know, and to Jay probably wasn't that well advised. I probably shouldn't have named them, but I was just upset about the fact that, you know, that they succumbed to getting, you know, bought out of the government and brought into Radiance Technologies, you know, and in fact actively participated in lobbying against the bill, you know, and I just thought it's so contrary to their entire previous lives of being in favor of disclosure that but I shouldn't have said anything to them, and I, you know, reached out to try to apologize to them. I shouldn't have mentioned them because it's just caused people to get all in a Twitter, literally, as it turns out, about all that. Sure. So I just avoid that, you know, 99.9% of the time if I can possibly help it. And so, you know, that's an additional challenge that we all have to deal with and accommodate. But this horizontal infighting that people engage in is just something that I refuse to engage in 99% of the time, you know, and I just have to I have to make sure that it's not even 1% of the time that I participate in any of that.
Yeah, I think what happens a lot of times is, look, it's not like there's some museum where we can go see UFOs and bodies and skeleton, right? All we have are stories to go off of and to talk about and what people said about things and who supports who. And essentially that's all we have to go off of. Yes, there are some videos here or photo here or something, but you know, it's blurry or it's out of focus or something's wrong with it. You know, there's nothing definitive. So it just, I think that's where a lot of that tension goes is like you're saying, horizontally, kind of like in the political realm, right? It goes horizontally instead of up towards the people who are, who we should be focusing on. So I agree. I mean, I agree. And I can't say that I haven't been a part of it, probably with some videos I've made, to be honest with you.
Well, you just have to be careful. I mean, because, you know, the conflict draws attention, you know, and when one is trying to kind of generate an audience to talk with, and, you know, that conflict, you know, attracts a lot of attention. So one has to be extremely careful in that regard. But people are in different places. I'm in a different place than you are. You know, you have a show that you need to do, and but in my role, I have to try to be friends with as many people as I can, and be as straightforward as I can with everyone, and not make comments about anyone that they're going to take undue umbrage at. You know, you know, but inevitably there are going to be people on the other side of an issue, in that if they conduct themselves fairly and constitutionally, that's fine. Then let's just have an open discussion. You know, but when they start doing things that are illegal, you know, like for example, I'll give you a classic example. It's a little bit of a long story, but we got time. That when we first found out about the Iran Contra stuff, when we realized that they were smuggling the weapons to the Contras in violation of the Boland Amendment, we ended up going out to St. Paul, Minnesota. We were invited by the mayor out there to come out and do a presentation at the Unitarian Universalist Society, right? And they put it on local cable television in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And so we had this huge gathering at the Unitarian Church, and they had all the local cable television stations and stuff were there. And so we presented the information that we were getting early on. And it turns out that one of the young fellows that was there was like on a Friday evening. And he was flying back Sunday to Washington, D.C., just coincidentally. And he gets on the plane, and he sees Senator Durnberger, you know, sitting in first class there. And he goes by him, and when they were in flight, the young fella gets up out of the steerage, you know, and basically goes up front and says, "Look, Senator Durenberger, I don't mean to interfere with you. I know it's kind of your private time, but here's some materials that I just got in a Friday briefing. Some people from the Christic Institute in Washington, D.C. came, and I just wanted you to get a chance to read these while you're flying. So he gave them the information, and it turns out it was the information that we had developed early on. And so Durenberger comes into Washington the next day. We're our office, we had a little cobbler shop that some of the people donated to us right at the bottom of Capitol Hill. It was like out of a bad B movie, you know. So
really? A cobbler shop, really?
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It was a little
Wow.
we even had the little metal feet. We left them in our office just for a conversation piece.
Wow.
But the bottom line is that we started, the phone started ringing off the hook, and it turns out that Durenberger had gotten up on the floor of the Senate and demanded a special congressional investigation of this so-called off-the-shelf enterprise that was smuggling weapons to the Contras and smuggling cocaine back into the United States on the same flights, etc. And he gets up and demands this. And so that we started getting all these phone calls that he had just gotten up. We didn't know where it was coming from. We didn't even know what had happened, right? And then so all of a sudden we get the sequencing went. That was Monday morning. Wednesday, we finally found out what had happened and how the information had gotten to him. And then on how did it go? He goes, yeah, it was Sunday morning. The following Sunday morning, Sarah and I had just gotten back from church, and we were sitting in our living room, and we were reading the New York Times and the Washington Post, a typical liberal undertaking, right? Except for the church part.
Yeah.
and then I get a call, and it's Jonathan Beatty from Time Magazine, right? And Jonathan is the guy that broke the BCCI story, all about the BCCI bank in Pakistan, all of that corrupt CIA bank. And so he calls me, he says, Danny, he said, look, I apologize for disturbing you on a Sunday morning, but I've got to come and see you right away. And I said, sure, come on over. So he comes over, you know, within the hour, he shows up on our front porch, right? And it's kind of raining out, and he's got this old trench coat on. He's all unshaven, you know, and I invite him in, and he said, look, I've got to tell you, he said, you know, my wife and I, we live out in Virginia, right 2 doors down from Senator Durenberger. And last night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Durenberger comes screaming down the street in her nightgown, you know, running up, pounding on our door to be let in. We let her in, and 3 Spanish-speaking men had come into the house and dragged her out of the bed and put a gun in her mouth and said that if she didn't get her husband to withdraw the demand for the congressional investigation, that they would come and kill the whole family, right? And so this is Jonathan Beatty telling me this, right? And so we were completely flabbergasted. And so the next morning, on Monday morning, Durenberger gets up on the floor of the Senate and withdraws his request for the hearing, right? And says that he got contacted by what was his name? Anyway, one of the guys from inside the White House, and said that there's nothing to these accusations at all. And he said that so he was withdrawing his complaint. Wednesday morning, on the front page of the Washington Times, the old Mooney rag in Washington, D.C., is the announcement. Here's a photograph of the love bungalow of Senator Durenberger and his mistress. That he's got this love bungalow in Washington, D.C., and they have it right on the front page of the Washington Times. And then Friday, it's announced that he's checked himself in voluntarily to the Cedars, this right-wing Christian fundamentalist alcohol rehabilitation program, and his political career is over in 1 week, just like that. You know, and that's the covert operations community, and that's what those the lengths to which they're willing to go. You know, and not only but they unseat Senator Church by putting the money into his campaign. They unseated Clark. They unseated what's his head in Indiana, Birch Bayh. You know, 3 of the United States senators. They put money into their campaigns, and it was all coordinated by Theodore Shackley, who was the director.
Do you think they're going to come after like Tim Burchett, Representative Luna, right? Some of these people, Marco Rubio.
No, they haven't become that dangerous yet. You know, that it's still kind of iffy what's going on here. You know, what lengths they're willing to go to. You know, and the atmosphere is different now, and it's not the same exact.
Oh, that's a good point.
Theodore Shackley is gone from the scene. I mean, but Theodore Shackley was handpicked by George Bush Sr. to be the director of covert operations for the CIA worldwide. He had been the former CIA station chief in Saigon, you know, running the Phoenix program that assassinated over 20,000 non-combatant civilians. This is the guy handpicked by George Bush to run the covert operations director of the CIA.
Wow.
You know, you got to understand what we're really dealing with here.
Sure.
So,
I mean, David Grusch testified to some of this, right? That he himself and his family, or his wife, right, have witnessed, you know, I don't know the exact words. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but have experienced some things.
That's right.
Right, for coming out, and he's heard of other people. I mean, he even talked about some people dying, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Essentially from
so,
this.
So we have to be careful, but you know, but we have to be courageous. We have to keep going forward to do this.
Sure.
We stay completely within the constitutional boundaries. You know, that we abide by the laws, and that we're trying to make the democratic system work the way that we've been promised it will. You know, and that we will succeed in doing this. We'll make this experiment work despite the natural inclinations of authoritarianism and corruption and all the things that plague our human family. But we've got this great experiment going on here, and it's fallen to our generations that are here now to carry it through. And it's, you know, it's a particularly troublesome time, as you know, right now. There's lots of threatened violence going on, and people, you know, becoming extremely hostile and antagonistic toward each other. But as you know, this particular issue, the disclosure of the UFO information, is probably the most bipartisan supported movement in the entire country right now.
That is true.
I mean, we got AOC and you know, and Tim Burchett sitting in the same meetings.
100%.
Being completely
couldn't agree more.
You know, and we can go into any one of the 435 congressional districts in the country and advocate this disclosure, and everybody supports us. You know, but what we've got to do is mobilize them so that they can overcome the resistance of this tiny handful of key people who are being funded basically by the private aerospace industry, and those who are the deep devotees of the national security state, you know, that want to keep this secret so they can develop it into a weapon, you know, and it's a very challenging time for our human family, where we have this extraordinary opportunity to open onto an entire new era in our entire human family of having a peaceful and prosperous, you know, mutual relationship with whatever this extraterrestrial civilization is, you know. But there are people that are devoted to their short-term personal profit, you know, and to be clear about it, you know, projecting U.S. military power, you know, on our planet, you know, that is more important to them than getting ourselves organized to step into this entire new positive future that our human family can have, because they don't view that as their job. Their job is a more narrow one, and that is actually to maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials on the planet, so that we can put them into the hands of our corporations, and they can generate more jobs and generate prosperity. And so we can continue to, as the 5% of the population on the planet, continue to consume, you know, massive percentages of the natural resources on the planet, so that we live like kings and queens. Now, we just have to be clear, Patrick, about what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So it's a major challenge that we have, and it's a major responsibility that I think we here in the United States have, to try to preserve this experiment, to prove that the democratic process can work, so that we can have shows like yours, and that we can talk openly about these kind of things, and, you know, not expect somebody to come kicking our door in the middle of the night. You know?
No, I'm with you. I love the conversation. This is what I'm all about. It's just talking about this stuff and having civil, respectful discussions. You know, you bring up a lot of great points, you know, I got to admit. And, you know, in this fight for disclosure, how do you feel that things like, I mean, personally, I have zero problem with, you know, a book, a documentary, these things. I actually, if I'm being honest, I enjoy those aspects of the phenomenon. You know, I look forward to someone's book or someone's documentary or whatever coming out. How do you think those things help? Like, you know, you got James Fox's documentary is going to come out, you know, Lou Elizondo's book, his documentary that's coming out. How do you think those things can help? Because it's a lot different than what you're doing, or is it?
Well, no, it's another aspect of what it is that we're doing. You know, that people who are in possession of information that the people need to have in order to make as informed a judgment as they're willing to pay attention to do, you know, that's what we can do.
Well said.
And so there are different ways of trying to get the information to people. You know, I mean, you can have a big nonfiction historical book, you know, 600-page book, and put it on everybody's bookshelves, you know, and they won't read it. You know, so that even though it's good to codify that information for history, we have to find other ways by means of which we can communicate information to people. You know, I mean, you know, on a given, you know, October afternoon in our country, you know, you have like, you know, 200 football stadiums all around the country with like 100,000 people in every one of them watching a blue team and red team chase a ball up and down the field. Now, I say that from having played football all the way into college, but the bottom line is, yeah, you put a book in front of them and say, here, read this. This is all about an extraterrestrial civilization, you know, and they'll do the football game, you know, at least the guys will, you know, and so that what you have to do.
You're not wrong.
No, so what you have to try to do is figure out how it is that you can put this information into a format that people will be interested in seeing, you know, and into some.
That's what I do with Vetted. That's what I do with Vetted in a lot of ways.
That's exactly what this is, and so that if we can have, you know, intelligent conversations like this, and adequately interesting, you know, for people will tend to watch it, and they'll come away going, holy shit. Did you hear what they said? Here's a piece of information. Let me look a little harder to see if it's true, you know. And what we're trying to do is help exercise the muscles of our democracy here. That's what we're all involved in doing, you know. And so I'm delighted to get to do it, and I've been doing it for over 50 years now. And I just got blessed. I mean, I ended up with a very particular kind of legal practice that isn't normal, you know. What I hasten to point out, there wasn't a lot of competition for it, you know. I mean, the lawyer for people involved in trying to get the UFO information conveyed, because the minute you started talking about it, everybody thought you were crazy, you know. And
that's so interesting. Are there other well-known, what you might call UFO lawyers around? Or you're it? Yeah, as far as I know, you're it. You're the guy.
Yeah. I said there wasn't a lot of competition for the post.
Yeah.
But as you say, that I've been doing all these other things. You know,
of course, your history is
all the other cases that I was doing. And so, fortunately, that began to lend some additional credibility to the fact that I was doing this, so that people would say, instead of saying, "Oh, who's that loony guy that's the UFO lawyer?" they would say, "Yeah, isn't that the guy that was on the team that did the Pentagon Papers?"
Yeah, exactly.
Did he help co-found the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review? And you'll go, yeah, well, gee, you know, isn't he putting that at risk, you know, by being involved in something like that? I mean, if you're not willing to take any risk, I mean, you're not ever going to make any kind of effective social change, you know, and you have to be willing to tolerate the criticisms and the attacks that you have to survive. I remember that but you know, you're known by your adversaries. You know, I mean, they put up these posters. At one time, all around Washington D.C., they had wanted posters up for me. I'm not engaged in self-aggrandizement here. I guess wanted posters that don't make you that famous. But the bottom line is, and it turns out that the people behind it was Jack Singlaub. Jack Singlaub was the president of the World Anti-Communist League. He was this ardent fascist, you know, that was putting these things up. And he was really upset because he was the guy that was helping to train the Contras, you know, and to help provide military equipment to them, et cetera.
Got it.
And thought that I was somehow unpatriotic because I was opposing these guys.
Sure.
But you know, I don't want to pretend like I'm just entertained by that. But for the honor of it all, you might as well forego those kind of criticisms. But the bottom line is that I don't worry much about that kind of stuff. As Father Davis used to tell us at the Jesuit headquarters, nobody gets out of life alive.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, look, to be fair, Danny, the reason I've even focused on a lot of what you said is because of your history and your credibility. And it's like, if this guy is saying something, I'm listening, right? I'm not just, like you said, you're not just some guy off the street saying this stuff. You're someone with an immense past and credibility, and the things that you've said, they have surprised me, alien DNA and abduction. Like, there's been a lot, your own story. There's a lot of stuff. It just becomes very hard to take in. But again, with your credibility and who you are, when you say those things, yeah, it makes me stop and listen to you of what you're saying. And that's at least for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but that's what makes me ask questions. It's like, hey, this guy is saying these things. Let's listen.
That's all we're asking people to do. It's just, look at all we're asking you to do is to pay attention. So look at here's what I'm saying to you, and look at here are the sources. That's why if you come to the newparadigminstitute.org, here's the information. And if you want to spend enough time looking at it, and that they came to me and said, look, would you be willing to have courses taught, so people can study about all this stuff? Oh, good. These are people that are willing to spend more time. But what we realized is that in order to get people to spend that kind of time on something, they want to get credit for it. They want to get college credit for it. So we ended up organizing this thing in such a way that people could get college credit for this. And I've insisted that it be at absolute minimal cost for anybody, whatever the costs are that this international university, has to undertake to kind of get people to do this. Let them do that. But that I'll do it for free. I'll tell people about the stuff. I'll give them the sources. In the very first lecture that we did, which was just basically giving people a kind of an overview of some of the major historical events that have taken place in the last 80 years or so, that we have people said, well, have you got a syllabus, that you can give them, like a university syllabus? So it turns out it's 260 pages long. so it was a little lengthy. So I said, okay, good. Wow. We'll make the 260-page syllabus for the first course, available. But we'll give them a summary as well. We'll pick the top 10 favorites, that you can dance to, to do that for people that don't want to spend the kind of time. But we want that to be available for people, sure, in case they want to dig into this kind of stuff. So
isn't Richard Nolan teaching some classes too?
Tomorrow.
I think.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Thursday morning.
Bam. Okay.
Thursday morning. It's 11 o'clock Pacific, so it's like 2 o'clock Eastern time. He's
okay. Great.
He's going to do a 90-minute lecture. Going into greater depth. But we've got the syllabus out for the course already. And then I did 8 different orientation lectures on it. In the second one, we actually covered what the major dominant understandings are about what the nature of the source of the UFOs are. To deal with the extraterrestrial theory, the extra-dimensional theory, the extra-temporal theory, whether there's some kind of a secret society here that, they got an ancient group that went under, there's all kinds of, we didn't indulge all of them, I mean,
sure.
But we even touched on how far we actually touched on the ones that people think that they're demonic. So we just have to try to, because what we want to be able to do is convey to people the fact that, look, we're trying to be comprehensive here. We're trying to show that we're willing to listen to all of the different arguments that are here, and that we'll have another whole course that goes into great detail about each one of these and what the best arguments are that are made on behalf of any one of these theories, and what the shortcomings of each of the theories are, so people can become engaged in this process. I mean, this is this has got to be one of the most interesting subjects in the whole history of the world.
It really is. I'll be honest. I was a little skeptical when I first heard that, Danny, if I'm just being honest. I was like, wait, university, like degrees, like how are you going to even use that? But I'll be honest, you explaining it, it makes sense if I'm being like, so, you know, I will go back on that. I think having you explain it like that makes a lot of sense. And I think people listening will understand. You're just going to gain more knowledge about this stuff to know about, because to be fair, when you get into this topic, you don't know where to start. You go to YouTube and you type UFOs and you just start going, and you don't really know what to do or where to go. So it's kind of clicking. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of clicking for me right now how that makes sense what you're doing now. That's clicking for me, because it's a place to start and get going and get you on the path. And all right, I can respect that. That makes sense.
And the reality is that if all of the major experts in the world are telling you, you know, that it's virtually certain that there's an extraterrestrial civilization somewhere, you know, I mean, that now that we know with all the James Webb telescopes and all the others, you know, that there's more than 100 billion star systems in our galaxy. There's more than 200 billion. There's more than 300 billion. It's more like 500 billion star systems in just our galaxy. You know, and that virtually all of those stars have planets around them, you know, and that in 20% of them at least have them in the Goldilocks zone, you know, and so that they're all sort of coming forward now and saying, oh yeah, well look, you know, that sure it's obvious. You know, I remember the first conversation I had with Carl Sagan about this years ago, which dates me. You know, is that you know that they said, yeah, well sure they're there, he said, you know, but you know they just can't get here. You know, because they're too far away, you know, and they certainly can't go faster than the speed of light. And that was before they'd actually discovered the particle, the tachyon, you know, in the collider that goes faster than the speed of light. You know? And it's an actual piece of material that goes faster than the speed of light. So it isn't true that that's an absolute barrier. And you know that the galaxy is at least 13.7 billion years old. You know, our star system and planet and stuff are only 4.5 to 3.5 billion years old. So you got other star systems with planets that could be as much as 6 or 7 billion years older than we are. You know, and you say, let me see if they've been working at this issue of faster than speed, as faster than light travel. What do you how do you think they might be doing on that by now?
Yeah, you know? 100%.
So
I mean, you know, without a doubt.
Now, given the fact that we're going to be discovering this, you know, in the comparatively near future, you know, it's important. The question you just asked kind of quickly, kind of parenthetically, is how's anybody going to use a degree in extraterrestrial studies? You know? Well, you're going to have it when the time comes, when somebody's going to be asking, well, doesn't anybody know about this stuff? Who knows about this stuff? And what we're trying to do is to train a group of people that have undergraduate degrees already, so that they can get a master's degree in extraterrestrial studies. Say, here are the different arguments on behalf of these different things, and so that you're going to not only understand the history of this, but you're going to understand the basic theories of where these what the origin of these UFOs are. Different species that may be coming here. You're going to understand the legal and constitutional implications of the concealment that's gone on all this time, so that when in fact the dam breaks on all this thing, you know, we're not having people running around with guillotines, you know, or trying to put, you know, hangman's nooses up on the congressional steps because the people lied to you. You know, I mean, and so you know, we've got to look at the psychological impacts on people of this, the kind of the collective social psychological impacts, the personal psychological impacts, you know, the religious and philosophical implications. You know, it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar, you know, to figure out what the areas are that we ought to be doing something about. But nobody's been doing anything about it for the last 50 years because they've been afraid. You know, because they've been told that if you start talking about this subject, you know, your family are going to think you're loony. You know, and then we discovered that there's a full-scale program going on with the CIA and in the military to make you think that.
Sure.
You know? And so
just the public stigma as a whole, right?
But that's where it comes from. That's where
it's a good point. That's a good point.
There is no such thing as the public view, and as such, it all comes from somewhere. And when you know that there's an active covert campaign going on the part of the intelligence community to generate that particular position, you know, you shouldn't be too surprised that that's how people feel, you know, because people are trained from the time they're in kindergarten to do what the people in positions of authority tell you to do. here's Mr. Police Officer. They're coming in to show you how he's going to help you go across the street safely. And it starts out right at that level. And anybody who's in a position of authority, you're supposed to take them as your source of truth, because obviously you're not going to spend your time figuring out what's true, which is supposed to be what you're supposed to be learning how to do actually at school.
Yeah.
but that's not what they're being trained to do.
Yeah.
Being trained to, become a cog in somebody's, business somewhere, working for somebody else, so what we're doing here is trying to get people at the base of the democratic process, learning to learn for yourself, learning to explore this thing. And we think that since this is probably the most interesting subject that you could possibly imagine, really. I mean, I
agree.
We may be biased, but I don't think so. I think any place you go, the minute you start talking about this, people all of a
100%.
sudden. All of a sudden they say, oh, well, okay, the New York Times says it's okay. It was even on 60 Minutes. I heard that it was on 60 Minutes.
Yeah,
so I guess it's okay to talk about it now. I've been interested in this for years, they say, but I never dared talk to anybody about it. And it goes on everywhere, Patrick. Everywhere you go.
I hear the same thing. People I talk to, anyone you bring it up, maybe in a group setting, people may be more joking with it still, but once it's one-on-one conversation, they got their own story. They heard of something. They want to know details. They saw a documentary one time, and they want. So yeah,
and it's across the board politically. So that
100%.
So we have this opportunity.
And classes.
Oh yeah,
politically, classes, religious, everything.
Every divisive criteria has been blown through by this, and so what we have here is we have this extraordinary opportunity to help kind of weld our community together around this issue. And the only people standing on the other side of it are the people who've got their hands in the till, that they want to be able to own the patent rights on the technology, et cetera. And you've probably heard the famous story that Jacques Vallée talks about. I think we should tell your people about it in case they hadn't heard it. But when Jacques Vallée was working with the Clinton administration back when they were thinking about divulging some of the information about the UFO stuff, with John Podesta and the rest of the folks.
Okay, in the 90s.
Said that Jacques Vallée was in a meeting where they were talking about how they might go about doing this, and he was talking to the science advisor for the Clinton administration. And he asked him, he said, well, what's going on the other side of this thing? Why are they pushing back against this? Why are they're fighting so hard against this? And the science advisor said, well, here, let's go outside so we can talk about this, which tells you something right off the bat. Sure. So they're out walking along, and the science advisor turns to him and says, look, let me tell you what I think is emblematic of what's going on here. He said, there's a story about this older man who was coming home from wherever he was one evening, and he's on his way home, and it's getting kind of the beginning of darkness, and he's walking through this field, and he looks down in the grass, and he sees this little light in the grass in the field, and he bends down and looks at it, and it turns out it's a frog. There's a frog, and it's got this little light on its head, and he bends down and he picks the frog up and looks at the frog, and it turns out it's a crown. It's a little crown on the head of the frog. Now, this is the story the science advisor is telling Jacques Vallée, right? It says, there's a crown on the head of the little frog. And the frog looks up at the older man and says, I'm not really a frog. I'm a beautiful princess. And I've been turned into a frog by this wicked sorcerer. And all you have to do is kiss me. And I'll turn back into a beautiful princess, and we'll be married, and we'll have wonderful children. We'll help rule the kingdom together in a positive way. And the old man looks at her and he says, actually, at my age, I think I'll settle for having a talking frog.
That's what I was thinking. I would rather have a talking frog. That's what I was thinking.
And so what I'm saying is that's the story that the science advisor told Jacques Vallée, is that the people are so tunnel visioned and so narrowly focused on what their own particular assignment is, or their own particular profit motive is, that they're missing out on this extraordinary opportunity that we have here for our entire human family.
The princess.
Yeah, and so what I want to do is I want to try to maintain an upward, positive, forward, momentum on this, to bring all of us together, to bring all of the different people in the Congress together that don't agree on most anything else, to get the different people in the different religious communities all together to say, look, let's all talk about this. Let's figure out what we can do to solve this. Get all the generations together.
Yeah.
and say, look at this is going to this may well be the historical point of demarcation that is in the future used to tell time. You know, is there's a post disclosure dating
Interesting.
of
I see what
our
you mean.
star history. You know, our actual chronological star history is going to be based upon what's going to happen in the next 7 to 10 years. I mean,
Wow.
so that we're talking about people got to get with it to try to understand what's really happening here.
That's
You know?
huge.
Now, if there was just one announcement that, oh, by the way, president comes on television and says, we've recovered an extraterrestrial non-human spacecraft, you know, and that we've recovered bodies from the craft and that they're not human, but they're obviously highly technologically developed. And so we're in the process of going to reach out to them now. I mean, everybody would be jumping out of their seats, you know, but because there's been such a campaign mounted over the last 50 years to try to quell this thing and to keep it silent so they could try to make weapons out of it, you know, which they view to be their job. That's their assignment. And they view any vehicle that's flying around in our airspace that they don't know about and they're not in charge of as being some potential threat. And they realize that's their assignment. That's their assignment to perceive it as a threat. And that is because they're part of a national security state that we've set up as of the end of the cold, as of the end of World War II. You know, we set up.
I don't know if I have a problem with that, though, Danny. If I'm being honest, why shouldn't we look at it as a threat? We don't know what they're doing. What I mean,
I understand.
It's probably better safe than sorry.
Well, but you got to understand that's the same exact primitive instinct that one had back when you're a caveman. You know, that, oh, I'm here in my cave. Oh, look at there's somebody coming across the field. I have to treat them as an enemy. You know, the fact of the matter is that's a primitive kind of.
I'm a pretty primitive guy.
Well, no, but that's true. And it's a primitive. Not that it's true that you're a primitive guy. But I mean,
I know what you meant.
You know, I played linebacker in college. I'm a pretty primitive guy. You know, it's taken a long time to overcome those kind of instincts I've got. You know, but what I'm saying is that's their job. And then what I'm saying is that we've got to be able to understand that they can't be allowed to be the ones who make policy for our entire country.
I agree with that.
It's a very narrow kind of responsibility that they've got. And they're not entitled to keep it secret and say, look at, you know, we're going to be the ones that make a decision as to how we're going to interact with an entire extraterrestrial civilization. And so what we're going to do is try to figure out how we can build a weapons system to fight against them. I say, no, wait a second here. We got to get other people in on the conversation. You know, this is a democracy, you know, and it may well be true that there are people who aren't as educated as they should be, and they may not be able to understand things as simply as possible. But the bottom line is our job is to try to figure out how to tell the story like a Sufi tale, you know, that is told at 3 or 4 different levels so that people can understand it at their own level of understanding. But understand that this is one of the most important moments in our entire human history, and that we have to conduct ourselves responsibly here. And we all have the obligation to do that, and not get involved in little side arguments with each other or little ego contests with each other. You know, you might be able to afford that when you're dealing with something less important. You know, but not this. You know, that we've got to rise above those kind of things here and work together and all agree that we need to get more information about this out. You know, we're not asking that we put on the front page of the New York Times how to build the intricacies of a hydrogen bomb here. You know, we're talking about the existence of an entire extraterrestrial civilization, you know, that surrounds us, you know, on this little island, like we're the little island in the Fiji Islands, you know, and we've got to come to understand that. You know, we're not going to run and jump out of a first-story window just because we discover that we're not at the apex of all intelligent life in the entire universe. You know, that isn't what's going to happen here. You know, people are more sophisticated than that now. You know, so I think this is an extraordinarily important time and interesting time, and I'm just delighted to get to be even a small part of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Look, I'll ask my final question here, Danny, because we've gone over the time you've allotted, so I appreciate that. But first of all, I agree with what you said there. I wish there was. That's why I'm not on Twitter. I don't mess around I post my stuff on Twitter and then I bounce. I leave and I don't. Nothing. So I get it. I try to stay out of all that and just focus on my content. But the biggest question I guess I would add, just to leave on some, you know, go out on something kind of fun, is what type of human intelligence. You know, you talk about the different theories. What to you, what is the most likely, and is there more than one, right? Like, do you think that's time travel? You know, what do you think? What do you think it is?
Look, Patrick, based on the kind of investigations that I've done over the last 50 years, what I've discovered over and over and over again is that what's happening is that more than one thing is going on at the same time. And everybody who, you know, who their whole access to complex issues is watching movies, you know, is that, you know, there's some simple drama that goes on and you just need to find out what the answer is. But the bottom line is, it's more like automobile accidents that happen. You know, you come to an intersection and one particular person is trying to run the red light, you know, before it turns red, and the other one's trying to, you know, beat the green light. And another one is, you know, drops something on the floor and they're kind of coasting into the intersection, you know, and they come together and crash. And you find out that there are these different phenomena going on, and people are conflating them, you know, and it's making it confusing. So one of the things we're trying to do here at the New Paradigm Institute is unpack these different things. I think the kind of stuff that's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, you know, it appears to be a phenomenon. And I got called, you know, we got called by Bigelow, you know, right when it happened. The very first one of these instances that happened, you know, Bigelow called John Mack. So it was like 1994 or so.
Yeah.
He called John Mack and said, look, he wanted John to come right out immediately to meet with Bigelow and bring your lawyer. He said, bring the lawyer, the kid you got representing you there at Harvard.
Oh, wow.
And bring him with you. So we fly out and we get to meet with Bigelow, you know, and by the time we got there, he decided he didn't want to do anything about it. That they had this group of people, these guys flew in and beat up their scientists. I don't know if you probably heard the whole story. Colin was there. So Colin Kelleher was there with him. So we come in and we go into it was like one of these converted, you know, whatever that, I don't know, was it Motel 9s or Motel 6s or whatever it is?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Motel 6, yeah.
Anyway, we go in there and here he is at the office. And we said, okay, look, you've asked us to come out here to meet you. What do you want? He said, no, I'm not going to do anything. I decided I'm not going to do anything. Don't worry. I'm sorry for bringing you all the way out here. And then Colin Kelleher kind of calls me over. He says, come here. And so he takes me into the little side room and he explains what had happened. You know, that in fact, one of their people on the site had been out in this meadow, in this like aperture just opens like this. And he can see into it, and he can see that it's like a different place there. He can't figure out what's going on.
Like a portal of some sort.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of almost like this sphincter just kind of opens like that. And he can look in, and he sees this being a big, tall, taller than he was, taller than 6 feet tall. And it's kind of hairy and looking like a weird Yeti, like, you know, character. And then they both were completely shocked. They both saw each other and they were stunned like this. And then all of a sudden it just closes back up again. Oh, the guy freaks out, not unexpectedly. And he calls Bigelow, and Bigelow sends in a whole team of people to kind of go over to where the site was. And they come in with all this equipment and measuring devices and cameras and all that stuff. And they're heading out to the site where it happened. And all of a sudden, this helicopter flies in. And these like 6 guys get out that are all in all black uniforms. They're American guys. They're clearly military guys, you know, but they're not in any kind of official uniform. It's all black, you know, jumpsuits. They jump out and they tell them they've got to get the hell out of there. And the guy said, no, that we're here. This is, you know, Mr. Bigelow owns the area, and that we're here to kind of look at. They said, no, you got to get out of here. And they ordered them out of there. And the scientists were kind of pushing back. And these guys start beating them up. You know, they break their equipment, they stomp on their cameras, and they start punching out these little weak scientists, right? So the scientists were freaked out, and they run away, and they run back, and they go back to the little bungalow house there that was on the site. And they're there all night, and all night long. So there was this horrible thing was happening. Like they felt like they were getting bombarded all night long with some kind of a high frequency thing that was happening to them. And none of them could sleep, and they were terrified all night long. And they run away and they call Bigelow. And Bigelow calls John Mack and says, look, something terribly weird is happening out here. You know, you got that whole project for extraordinary experience research you're doing, you know, come on out here and bring your lawyer. So we come out, as I said, we walk in to meet with him, and he's going, no, look, I've decided I'm not going to really do anything. I don't really want to cause trouble here. And then Kelleher, as I said, pulls me out and tells me the story about what's going on, and I'm going, wow. Fuck, somebody ought to see the shit out of them. Somebody ought to figure out who these guys are and do something about it, right? And he's going, no, I'm not looking for trouble. I don't want. And so I was there right from the very beginning, right from that thing, and so I'm saying something's going on there, but I don't associate it, with UFOs automatically. I say, look,
that's interesting.
That our position at the New Paradigm Institute, at least our preliminary position, is a pretty simple one. Look at everybody with an intellectual IQ above room temperature realizes that there's extraterrestrial life out there, right? And most of the people realize that they've got billions of years, some of them more time, to look into the issue of superluminal travel. And it's quite clear that they're coming here. Okay, so we got that phenomenon going on. Okay, so now whatever else is going on, ghosts, people may be seeing ghosts in haunted houses. They may be running into leprechauns over in Ireland. They may find trolls under the bridge somewhere. But that's not what we're talking about right away. What we're talking about is the UFO phenomenon, and they can try to expand it into UAPs and then pretend instead of it's unidentified aerial phenomenon, it's unidentified anomalous phenomenon, and they can try to expand it out into examining toadstools, whatever it is they want to do, But the bottom line is we're talking about UFOs here, and we're talking about an extraterrestrial civilization that we're going to have to come to grips with. And try to get to accommodate and learn how to integrate this into our worldview. So that's what I'm involved in. And so what I've discovered is that people are conflating all kinds of different things. People are conflating apparitions of Mary, with leprechauns and ghosts and and all this stuff. And what I'm saying, look, let's just calm down here. Let's kind of spread these things out in front of us and try to get a look at what the different theories are of what's going on, understand what is getting conflated one with another, and take a look at what we're talking about here. And now when we're talking about the occupants of the UFOs as craft that are actually transporting conscious living beings around, the primary theory is that they come from one of the many extraterrestrial civilizations that we're virtually certain exist. And secondly, there's the fact is that whatever the means of transport is that they're using to get here, it presents as though it's almost extra dimensional, because it sort of materializes and dematerializes, and so therefore people are going, oh wow, that's coming from some other dimension. Well, fine, if that's the way your head works, oh, there's another dimension. But if that's how the particular means of transport manifests itself, you're going to start conflating it with extra dimensionality.
Sure.
Okay. And of course, then people say, well, once we really cross into this realm, we really realize that their physics are different than our physics, because, they're flying 20,000 miles an hour inside our atmosphere without any friction, and they're coming from 80,000 feet down to the sea level, in 0.7 of 1 second and stopping on a dime. That's 600 G's, and they're all surviving it. And so they've got some entirely different kind of physics that we've got. And so when we really start thinking about physics, one of the surprising things we've discovered is, well, it turns out that time is just one of the dimensions of our three-dimensional world. There's actually a fourth dimension of time. And so what about time travel? That's really interesting. We've thought about that a lot. Maybe these are coming from some other place, from some other time, and then the fact that they look so much like us.
I like that theory a lot, actually. The future humans.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the conversations I had with Peter Skavich, over the people at Sol. I said, this issue of perfectly well that sometime, if we don't completely destroy ourselves on the planet, which unfortunately is getting to be a pretty high probability now, if we don't destroy ourselves, there's going to come a point in time when we're going to actually be able to figure out something that has to do with time. And if it's in fact just another dimension, we may be able to get outside of it and move around a bit with it. And so that this is a viable theory that we have to examine. So we've got it on the table to look at, and then they've got this other one, which I find a little less credible, is that, maybe some ancient civilization like Atlantis or something survived, and, they've gone underground and they've spent, the last, 1,000 years keeping themselves secret. I don't know why they'd want to stay under the ground for 1,000 years if they can come out.
I know, right? Yeah, the ultra terrestrial.
Yeah.
Why? It's beautiful up here.
Yeah,
come on up. Yeah,
I was going to say, unless they're into dirt,
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I don't want to disparage that, because some people are proselytizing on behalf of it. So I'm saying, good.
Sure.
Look, the New Paradigm Institute is going to look at all of these things. We've laid them out. We got a whole course that's going to be taught on all of these different theories, so that we can weigh the positives and negatives of each one of them. So we're doing that. So, but what my own personal feeling is that, look, let's just start with Occam's razor, to kind of the simplest explanation of this, which isn't that these are ours, even though you might think that's the easiest thing to think of. Well, so the SR-71, we got all kinds of things you don't know about, Danny, because you won't accept a security clearance. So we got all kinds of stuff, Yeah. As Lou said, Lou and I were meeting with the board of the people from the Associated Press, kind of an off the record conversation we were having with them. And one of the guys asked the question, where did these things come from? And Lou said, well, the most of the people that have been involved professionally inside the government circles working on this, think that the major premise is that they're probably extraterrestrial. And the guy said, oh, you're really extraterrestrial? You really think they're extraterrestrial? And then Lou said, or they may be extra dimensional. And the guy said, extra dimensional? He said, and he said, or, they could be extra temporal. He ran through the little list of them like that.
Yeah.
He said, the one thing we know, he says, we know that they're not ours, no matter what many people say,
Sure.
because they haven't made that much progress really in back engineering some of these things. So that these things that are, he said, and most importantly, we know they're not ours because these things have been being observed by our people since 1947, he said. And he said it right to him, just like that, right?
Wow.
And he said, and so we didn't have anything like this in 1947, So let's be clear. He said,
I mean, that is a good point when people bring that up.
That's right, and people don't think about it. And he said they surely weren't. They surely weren't the Russians. He said back in 1947. He said back in 1947 we just got done with World War II. He said the Russians lost 20 million people in World War II. He said, that they were tearing up the rail lines that would go into Europe so they could have metal.
Totally.
He said, so that they didn't have this kind of technology. And he said, surely the Chinese didn't have it. He said, the Chinese, he said in 1947, the major means of transportation for the Chinese, he says, were carts with stone wheels, he said at that point. That's what he said. He said, so, they're not Chinese. Let me tell you that. He said, so, so that we're looking at this, but the major premise seems to be believing that they're probably extraterrestrial. And so that's the main thing we're looking at, so that's where we're going at it from the New Paradigm Institute. Let's start with the simplest explanation, as strange as that sounds. And the simplest explanation isn't that they're ours.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that they've been working all this time to try to back engineer them, and I don't doubt that they've figured out some kind of pieces of this, and that they're figuring out how to mask their craft. And and Michael Schrapp, is showing all the different pictures of all the different kind of things they've been experimenting with and all that. But UFOs are not some super secret technology that we developed. And even Stephen Greer, who talks about this all the time, about, they're all 95% of the things you see are all our stuff. I mean, the question is, where'd they get it from? I mean, totally. how many real UFOs do you have to have in order to say, oh, well, there's probably only 2 or 3 extraterrestrial craft that we've got. Okay, good. Let's start there, and realize that, that's something that needs to get looked at. I'm not into beating up on our military people about what kind of weapons systems they're trying to develop. I'm saying, look, if we've got even 1 or 2 real extraterrestrial craft here, that's what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to talk about who are these people? Where are they coming from? What are they up to? What is our relationship with them? What can we do now in the generations that are alive right now in this 7 to 10 year period to figure out how to develop the kind of protocols that we need to have to live peacefully with these people and not submit ourselves to being kind of just losing all of our sovereignty, losing all of our individual liberties, etc., because they happen to know more than we know. that we've got to come to grips with this, and we've got to have serious conversations about it, because we're past that point now of trying to pretend that they're not real, and that's what the New Paradigm Institute is really doing. And we're hoping that everybody's going to cooperate on this. And all we're trying to do is trying to facilitate that process, to get all the people working together, all going in the same direction, stop fighting with each other horizontally, and picking at who said what, and be careful, even a little more careful than I've been upon occasion, not to say anything bad about anybody, just because you're a little piqued over the fact that they were opposing our bill, it's fine. That we're all friends, and let's get this thing solved together.
Yeah, I mean, well said, Danny. I can't say that I disagree with any of that, right? Like, I agree with all that. I'm totally on board for everybody coming together to figure out what's going on and working together instead of fighting against each other. Yeah, I think that's a message a lot of people can get behind, and a lot of sensible people can get behind that message, right? So yeah. Listen, Danny, this has been absolutely amazing. I've waited a long time to have this conversation with you, and it went amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time and us just having a great conversation about this, a nice civil discussion. I think people are going to be happy and surprised that we did this. I haven't told anybody. I'm just going to drop it on the veteran community tomorrow, and they're going to be surprised and happy that you came on. And yeah,
I'm happy to be here, Patrick. Anytime you just give me a holler. Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you get some chance, don't forget to take care of yourself too, Danny.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. I'll have to remember that sometime.
Yeah.
Right. Father
on the calendar.
Father Dave, you can always rest when you're dead. You know? That's you only got 100 years here. You got to make the most of it.
Yeah. No, I hear you for sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, Danny, and my best to Tyler for helping as well. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Great. I'll see you again.
All right, brother.
Okay.
Thank you, Danny.
Patrick.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross